Luke Abrams pulled into his designated parking spot at work and waited for the Grateful Dead's song Ripple to finish playing before he turned off the car and opened the door. He looked up at the neon sign above the building's entryway and felt a sense of pride at seeing Abrams Manufacturing above the doorway. The security guard at the door greeted him as Luke made his way to his top-floor corner office. It had been 10 years since Luke had developed an efficiency control and monitoring instrument for HVAC systems, which had now captured 80% share of the controls market. They had developed many other control and measurement systems in the years after, but this remained the cash cow and gave him and his employees a very good living. He had developed a profit-sharing system 5 years ago that had helped him motivate and retain excellent employees, and with the profits driven by their various patented instruments, each employee enjoyed a 401k with 100% match to 6%, and a 15% profit-sharing year-end distribution. In the exceptional years, they could also get a 10% after-tax take-home bonus. His CFO told him the value of the company now stood at $20 million, and not a month went by that some firm or venture capitalists wanted to discuss buying the business. Luke wasn't interested as he loved the work, the business, his team of people, and he saw no reason at this young age to cash out. Life was good. His home life had been excellent through the years. He and Becky, his wife of 14 years, had struggled at first when he started up the business, but now lived very comfortably. Becky worked part-time as a marketing consultant and many times worked from home. She was a tall 5'8" with fiery red hair and an incredible body. Her friends would bemoan the fact that her breasts and figure were perfect and that she had the bonus of legs that went on for miles. Their intimate life had been really good, although Luke had noticed a definite reduction in the last 6 months, from 3 to 4 times weekly to just 1 time per week. Becky also seemed to be more attached to her phone, sending texts to God knows who, and once when he picked it up to check on the ball scores, he noticed it was now password protected, something neither of them had done in the past. He had talked to her about the intimacy and about her being more subdued and quieter in their interactions, but she said he was noticing things and that she was feeling her age more and tired more, and he should just know that she loved him more than he could ever imagine. They had talked about starting a family and she was reluctant, but he had told her how important it was to him, and she had acquiesced, and 5 months ago had agreed that within 6 months, she would go off of birth control and they would start working on having a family. She wasn't as excited about it as he was, but he thought she was warming up to the idea. As Luke sat in his office thinking about this, his friend and VP of sales, Chad Warwick, came into his office, looking sheepish. Chad had been a friend in college, and they had played soccer and hockey together in high school. He wasn't his best friend, but Luke considered him close. Now the relationship was a mixture of friendship, but also Luke was the boss, and although he treated his employees as partners, what Luke ultimately decided was what they did. Chad peeked in the door and said, "Boss, I'm feeling really awful today. Feel like I have the flu or something, so if you don't mind, I'm going home to sleep and I'll either be back later or in tomorrow. I'm done with the proposal for the new convention center's HVAC controls and sent it off, so my plate is clear for the next several days. I'll see you tomorrow." "Okay, Chad. Hang in there and hope you feel better." With that, Luke did his management by walking around the loop and going through the sales and marketing offices and the HR group, and then out into distribution and manufacturing, where he loved to spend time talking with and getting ideas from the factory floor staff. This was a ritual that he did every couple of days, and it usually took him an hour or more. But time to get back to the office for some strategy work. Luke decided to do more work on a new business line he was thinking about creating and opened up his workstation to pull down the files. He noticed that he had the old version and remembered that he had worked on it over the weekend and had saved the files to his home computer instead of signing on via VPN and uploading it to the company server. He figured he could talk Becky through calling the file up and emailing it to him instead of making the drive home. He tried calling the home line and it went to voicemail. He tried calling Becky's phone and it was turned off, which he found strange given it was a workday for her. Well, he thought, guess I make the 20-minute drive. Luke was enjoying the weather and some good tunes on NPR when he turned onto his block and drove up to his house. He noticed a car in the driveway that looked familiar, and it didn't take him long to figure out that it was his friend Chad's Lexus. Luke parked on the street and walked up the drive and quietly opened the front door. The first floor was quiet, and no lights or radio were on. Becky wasn't in the study at her desk. He went into the kitchen and then heard some moaning and voices coming from the master bedroom. In his mind and his heart, he couldn't believe what his gut already knew, that someone was being intimate with his wife in his bed. He grabbed the 12-inch Wusthof meat carver out of the rack and slowly walked up the stairs. He stood out in the hall, blocked by the door jamb so they couldn't see him, but he could hear what they were saying. They were cuddling and talking, and he heard Becky say, "Chad, we can only do this a few more times. I think Luke is getting suspicious of my aloofness and my constant texting on the phone. And I haven't been intimate with him more than once a week because I feel so guilty and it feels so wrong to be with you, and then him the next day. I have loved our little fling for the last 4 months. It's been my self-indulgent treat to have forbidden and illicit relations before I commit myself to going off the pill and trying to have a family. So, now I want you to be with me like you never have, as there will only be this time, and then the Denver conference, and then we are done." Luke remembered that Becky told him she was going to a marketing conference in Denver in 2 weeks, and he quickly realized it coincided with a sales conference Chad would be attending in Denver that same weekend. Luke was crushed at what he heard. He pulled out his phone and started the video as he peeked slowly around the door jamb. His wife Becky was now on top of his friend and employee Chad, moving with great energy. Luke was panting and saying, "You love it when I'm with you in your marriage bed, don't you? You can't get enough of me and no one can please you like I do. Say it, damn it." At that point, Luke walked into the room, still filming with the phone in one hand and the knife in the other. He grabbed Becky by the hair and pulled her up off of Chad, turned her around, and pushed her onto the bed beside him. At first, she screamed and yelled until she saw it was Luke, and then her eyes went wide and her mouth flew open and she screamed, "No, no, no, dear God, no, Luke, it isn't what you think. It means nothing." At this point, she tried to stand up and come to Luke as Chad tried to move to the end of the bed and stand, but Luke held out the knife and yelled, "Both of you sit back on that bed and shut the heck up, or you'll find a 12-inch blade in your chest. Sit down now." They both sat down and pulled the sheet up. Becky started to sob uncontrollably, and Chad started to say to Luke, "Boss, really this was nothing. Just physical. Just a diversion for us. It doesn't mean anything." Becky jumped in and said, "Luke, I love you." This was only meaningless physical relations with Chad. "It doesn't change anything about how I feel for you. It was just a last-time fling for me to sow some wild oats before you and I settle down and start a family. Please, Luke, this is nothing. Send Chad away and come and cuddle with me and I'll make it up to you." Luke looked at her as if she had lost her mind. He was incredulous about what she just said. "Becky, it didn't mean a thing? Well, I guess you proved that our marriage didn't mean a thing to you. I guess you just demonstrated that you have no respect for me and that I was a fool to trust you loved me. How could you possibly say you love me when you're being intimate with my employee for months and in my own bed? You want me to cuddle with you. I can barely stand to look at you and I'll never touch you again. That much is for goddamn sure. Now just sit there and shut the heck up, you pitiful woman." Becky recoiled at the sight of his anger and his pain. He had never talked to her like that. In fact, he had practically worshipped her in their marriage and treated her with love and respect, and his response cut right into her soul at what she had done to hurt him. With that, Luke made a quick call, and as the other party answered, he looked at Chad and said, "Janie, this is Luke. I'm sending you a video of your husband, Chad, being intimate with my wife Becky in my bed. I don't know if you knew he was cheating on you and your children, and I'm just so sorry to have to tell you." Luke paused for a few minutes before he hung up and then told Chad, "She says don't bother coming home. Evidently, this isn't the first time you betrayed your life and your kids. Now you can add that you betrayed your friend and your boss and ruined both my and your marriages. What a worthless person you are. I'm going to give you one chance to save your job. Tell me exactly when this started and how many times you two have been together." Becky looked at Luke and said, "No, Luke. Don't make us go over that. It doesn't matter, it means nothing, and it stops right now. Please." The look Luke gave her of hate and pain made her recoil further back, pressed into the headboard, and she had to avert her eyes. She continued to cry and weep as Chad responded to Luke. "Luke, please, don't throw away our friendship over this, and don't let it affect the good job I have been doing for the company. Becky means nothing to me, and I mean nothing to her. We were only enticed by the physical lust of an illicit affair. This is the 4th time we have met. The first time we were both in Denver on separate conferences, and I knew she was going to be there from a discussion we had at the company BBQ. So I got her number and called her up the first night to go to dinner. Well, we ate, drank heavily, and danced and really felt a spark for each other, so that night and the next, we went up to my room and were intimate. Then about 1 month later, Becky called me up and told me you were going out of town for the day to visit a new construction site, and she asked me to come over. We ended up in your room, and she seemed to get off doing it in your marriage bed. 3 weeks later, we got a room at the Hilton and had a noon lunch meeting and were together there. And now this time, when she called me and asked me to call in sick and come over and be with her because she was so incredibly aroused. We were going to make the next conference in Denver next month the last time and spend 3 nights together trying to get this out of our system. We have both been feeling guilty and shitty about doing this to you and to my family. Becky knows you want to have kids, and she told you she would go off the pill and work on having a family, so we decided this is it, and we were going to recommit ourselves to being good married spouses. I'm so sorry, Luke. Looking back, I knew this was so wrong, and now I have destroyed my marriage and possibly your marriage and my career unless you can forgive us." Becky looked at Luke and said, "Yes, Luke. I was so caught up in the excitement of a clandestine affair. It wasn't anything about you, Luke. I love you. I've never loved anyone but you, and I want to have a family with you and grow old with you. You treated me like a queen. Being with Chad was fun, but it was nothing compared to being with you. Please don't throw me and our marriage away over a mistake. It meant nothing." Luke looked at her and screamed, "Nothing? It means nothing? Do you even know me? How can you possibly think that letting another man be intimate with you would ever mean nothing to our marriage? How do you think I could ever get past the hurt of being cheated on? Get past the lies and ever trust you again? How could you possibly think that I would ever want to touch your cheating body again? How do you think I could ever have the same spark, bond, and love that I had for you after you disrespected me this badly? How can you not see the strain it had already put on our marriage? The lack of talking and communicating, the reduction of intimacy and turning that intimacy into just mechanical actions for you, something to get checked off your to-do list. A mistake might be one drunken night, but planning and executing meeting at out-of-town conventions and at our home is an affair, not a mistake. What the heck is wrong with you?" Becky was beginning to understand for the first time what she had done. She had convinced herself this was a meaningless physical relationship, and it wouldn't damage her relationship, maybe would even make it stronger. But as Luke talked, she did understand that she had pulled back both emotionally and physically from Luke. She didn't understand why, as she loved and wanted only him. Maybe it was the guilt that she tried to keep buried, eating away at her and her relationship. She thought that she would never be found out. Luke trusted her so much. She could see that that trust would never be the same. She thought if she was caught that Luke loved her so much, he would forgive her, and she would quickly make him forget by being a loving and caring wife and having a family. She now understood how she had been lying to herself, rationalizing that everything would be better and fine so that she could justify having her last fling before a family. She had fooled herself that she deserved this, and it would make her a better wife. Now she was seeing how much pain and disrespect she had heaped on the man that she loved so much and wanted to have his babies and a long and happy life with. My God, she thought, have I ruined this? How do I get us past this? All she could do was look at Luke and say, "Please, Luke, please forgive me for how I have hurt you. I didn't think enough about what I was doing. I didn't know it would be so devastating. I never meant to disrespect you. I never wanted to hurt you as much as I now realize I have." Luke held up his phone and played back part of the video where she was breathlessly saying, "Yes, Chad. No one makes me feel the way you do. Don't stop." Then looked at her and said, "How could you possibly think you weren't disrespecting me when making comments like this and being with this worthless person in my own bed? You disgust me." Luke looked at Chad and said, "I lied, Chad. There is no way you are saving your job. Don't bother to come in tomorrow. You are fired. Now get the heck out of my house." Chad moved to the end of the bed and started to get up, and so did Becky, but Luke yelled at her and said, "Stay there in those soiled sheets, you cheater, and don't move." She shrank back into the bed as she saw the pain and hurt in Luke's face turn into a look of anger and pure hatred. My God, what did I do to hurt such a good man and turn his love for me into hate? Chad grabbed his clothes and flew down the stairs and out the door and sped away in his car. Luke looked at Becky and started to cry. She rose off the bed and tried to come to him and hug him, but he looked at her body in disgust and turned away and held up the knife between him and her so she wouldn't approach him. She looked down at herself and saw evidence of their intimacy and saw herself the same way Luke did, as a gross, cheating, lying person who betrayed everything that was sacred in her relationship. She broke down crying and ran to the bathroom, locked the door, turned on the shower, and sank to the floor. She hoped that perhaps if she gave Luke space, he would calm down and they could talk through this. It was her only hope. She cried and washed herself for the next 30 minutes. When she had washed herself and dried off with a towel and put on her robe, she quietly opened the bathroom door, worried about another torrid yelling attack from Luke, and knowing she deserved every bit of it. But the room was quiet. She peeked out into the hallway, and the house seemed quiet. She yelled out, "Luke, I'll make up the spare bedroom for you and stay away from you for as long as you want until you calm down enough to let me talk to you and explain my actions and beg for your forgiveness." She heard no response. She turned back to the master and saw that Luke's dresser drawers were opened and empty, and most of the clothes in his closet were gone. The 2 large suitcases from the closet were gone. She then turned around and saw the 12-inch butcher knife buried to the hilt through her pillow and into the mattress. She realized Luke was gone and could only hope he would stay safe, not harm himself, and take her calls when he calmed down in a day or two. She walked into the spare bedroom, threw herself on the bed, curled up into the fetal position, and cried herself to sleep. Luke went to his office and ended up spending a very restless night on the couch in his attached conference room. He notified HR and security about the termination of Chad. Later that morning, Chad did show up on site, assuming that Luke had cooled off and fired him only in the heat of the moment. But Chad was surprised when security took his badge and escorted him out to his car and told him that if he were to show up on site again, the police would be called. Luke spent a couple of hours at his desk, in isolation, pondering where to go from here. He knew himself so well that even given the depth of his love for Becky, the marriage was over. He could never feel the same spark of joy for her, the trust in her, and the profound sharing of his heart and soul with her, and that meant the marriage would be a fiasco, never able to come close to what they once had. Call it pride, call it hurt, anger, or jealousy. It didn't matter what you labeled it. He had been so disrespected that he knew she couldn't really have the love and connection to him that he deserved and wanted in a life partner. Moving forward with a plan for kids and family would be folly. It was over. Luke called in his CFO, and they went through 4 hours of very detailed discussion about the value of the company and what Luke had decided to do. His right-hand financial man was stunned after hearing about Chad and Luke's wife, Becky. He pleaded with him to not do anything rash, to allow his anger and pain to subside for a few weeks and then decide what he wanted to do. But Luke's mind was made up. Becky woke up that morning, and the pain and hurt that she had seen in Luke's face quickly descended on her as she became fully conscious. My God, how could I have been so stupid? Some mediocre physical relations with someone I barely like, much less love, may have destroyed my marriage to the only man I really have loved. What is wrong with me? She was determined to fix this, to get Luke back, to get them both back to the way they were before she was stupid enough to have an affair. She was sure that Luke loved her so much he would never leave her. Even though she had promised him some time to sort himself out before she contacted him, she couldn't keep herself from calling his cell. It immediately went to voicemail, so she left him a message. Luke, I am so very sorry. I love you so much, and I know I have hurt you, and I am so ashamed. But Luke, you love me and I love you, and we can get past this. I will do anything you want to make this go away. I promise I will be the best wife and mother you could hope for. Please come and see me or call me. I need you. Please talk to me, Luke. There was no reply from Luke that day or the next day. The third day she called his office and got his executive administrator, Brenda. Brenda was very close to Luke, idolized him in fact, and Luke had confided in her what had happened between Chad and Becky. Brenda picked up the call from Becky and told her in no uncertain terms that Luke was busy, had instructed her to not put through any personal calls to him, and that he would appreciate being left alone until he was ready. Becky assumed she meant ready to talk, but she hadn't really said that. Well, for now, Becky knew that Luke needed time and had asked for time. Becky got a call from Chad and now knew that Luke had indeed gone ahead with the termination of his job. She also heard that Chad's wife had kicked him out and he was back staying with his parents. He hinted that he would like to come over and talk to Becky about getting Luke to forgive them, but she told him to get lost and that she never wanted to talk to him again. She was putting a lot of the blame on him, although subconsciously she knew she was kidding herself, and she was just as guilty, if not more, than Chad. She still couldn't wrap her head around why she really did it and how stupid she could be to jeopardize everything she had with Luke. Becky gave Luke a week and then couldn't stand it anymore. She called his cell, but it immediately rolled to a recorded message saying the number was no longer in service. She called his office and was told that Luke would not be available and she should stop calling. That was too much for her to take. She had to go on the offense. She had wanted to keep her affair private, hoping and assuming that Luke wouldn't want family and friends to know he had been cheated on by her. But now she started to call all of his friends and ask if they knew where he was staying and what he was thinking. All of them simply told her that they had nothing to say to her and that Luke had told them it was a private issue between him and her. The way they treated her with such little respect and empathy made her understand that Luke had likely told them about her affair, and this added to her shame and sadness. Becky finally called Luke's parents to see if maybe he was staying there. But when they picked up the phone and she identified herself and said, "Hi," they hung up on her. She called again and they let it roll to voicemail. She got in her car and drove to Luke's manufacturing company and persuaded security to let her into the lobby. They called down Luke's executive assistant, Brenda, and she walked up to Becky and asked her bluntly what she wanted. Becky was close to tears and said, "I want my husband to come down here and talk to me right now. He needs to respect his wife enough to talk to her and enough to let me explain." Beth just looked at her and said, "He needs to respect his wife, just like she respected him and their marriage? Maybe you need to think a lot harder about what you have done. Regardless, Luke no longer works here. He has sold the company and left the area and has been very specific about not forwarding any information on his current state, well-being, or location to you. Now please leave or I'll have security escort you off the premises." Becky rushed home in total confusion. Sold the company? He would never do that. Left the area? Why wouldn't he talk to her? She got on her email and tried to write him a long letter of apology, but when she sent it to both his personal and work email addresses, it bounced back as an invalid address. She tried his parents again, but they had blocked her number. She went back up to the spare bedroom and collapsed on the bed. For the next 4 weeks, Becky lived like a zombie. She had heard nothing from Luke, no word on where he was or how he was dealing with their marriage. In her frustration, she hired a private investigation firm, and they eventually sent her a report with limited information. They told her that Luke had sold his company, and although the exact price wasn't public, it was estimated to have gone for over $20 million. They told her that he had closed all of Becky and his joint accounts and credit cards, canceled his phone and internet and email, sold all of his possessions of value, and had evidently left town. They told her that Luke had paid off the mortgage to the house and put the deed in her name. They had been unable to get any of his friends, workmates, or relatives to tell them anything about his location or how to contact him. 8 weeks after Luke had left, a man came to the front door and handed Becky a manila envelope. She could see it was Luke's writing on the address label, and she ripped it open hoping for some information. The first thing that fell out as she opened the envelope was his wedding ring, then some documents, and then a photograph that was cut into strips. As she pieced together the photograph, she quickly saw it was their wedding portrait that had been sent through a shredder. She broke down and cried for several minutes until she was able to open the rest of the contents of the envelope. There were legal documents and a written letter. There was also a USB stick in the envelope. She grabbed the letter and began to read it. "Becky, I know you wanted to see me, talk to me, and you were confident that we could get past your affair. You considered it just meaningless physical relations, a mistake, something that I should just forget, and that we would go back to the marriage we had before you decided to break our wedding vows and my trust. I was amazed that you could kid yourself into thinking it would ever be the same, or even close to the same. I know that you could never have loved me, at least the way I loved you, to be able to cheat on me like that. You didn't seem to understand the hurt and pain that you caused. No one has ever hurt me that badly, and for it to come from the woman I loved more than life itself was too much to ever forgive. I would never be able to trust you again, never be able to touch you and be intimate with you without seeing what I saw. Perhaps you don't remember it as being that bad or that big of a deal. If so, I have enclosed the video of you and Chad destroying our marriage. Your words alone are enough to break my heart over and over every time I think of them. It became apparent to me from the calls I initially received from our very close friends and relatives about how I could leave you and why I would be so cruel as to disappear from your life that you never took responsibility for your actions with them or likely with your family. I am sorry to say that this same video, with a different letter, has now been sent to those people so they understand the depth of your betrayal and how there would be no getting over this. I have been so devastated and destroyed by you that I supposed I wanted some revenge in return. I am not happy about my actions, but believe they were the only road open to me. I have decided that from this day forward, you will never hear from me again. You will never see me again. And I will never return to our house, our town, maybe even our state. I guess I will never understand why you did this. If it was something missing in me that drove you to this, or if it was something missing in you. I hope you figure it out before having another serious relationship, and I hope that you remember my pain before you would ever consider cheating on anyone again. I hope that someday in the near future, I can get past the pain, humiliation, and disrespect you have put me through, to remember the earlier times in our relationship that were filled with love. I hope that sometime, instead of the hate I feel for you, I can feel at least indifferent. Or if I become truly the man, I would like to be, perhaps I can find forgiveness or understanding. Regardless, you will never see that day. Perhaps you don't really care at this point. I guess I'll never know, and that is something I too will live with. Goodbye. The last set of documents in the envelope were entitled Divorce Dissolution, but at that point Becky couldn't see through her tears and she slumped to the floor. It had been 5 years since Luke had disappeared, and true to his letter, Becky had not heard a word from anyone about his health, his spirit, his location, or his life. Luke had been quite generous in the divorce decree, offering her $1 million and the house and possessions in lieu of any ongoing financial support. Her lawyer told her it was the best offer she would get, as the $22 million that Luke sold the company for was not held in the United States and would never be available for any court-ordered restitution anyway. Becky really didn't care. In her mind, she deserved nothing, and she would never fight anything that Luke had decided was fair. Her life had been very rough at first, as her friends and family saw the devastating video of her being with Chad in her marriage bed. She understood how much she had really hurt Luke, and how she had driven him to hurt her back by sending out the video. She also understood it was a quick way to stop anyone from asking her or him about what happened and if they could get back together again. She had felt extreme humiliation, embarrassment, and hurt in having her friends and relatives see that, but she understood it still wasn't as bad as what seeing and hearing that had done to Luke. She lived with her shame, and at her parents' urging, had decided to go to a therapist to work on her sorrow and her depression and try to turn her life around from the gloom that hung on her like a coat and affected her in every aspect of her life. She had had a few dates, but she really couldn't seem to ever enjoy herself or let anyone into her personal thoughts and pain, so nothing ever progressed beyond a few painfully awkward dates. She had had a few one-night encounters to try and find some comfort in physical connection, and they had been so awkward, so degrading, and such a dismal reminder of what she once had being reduced to this, that she could not longer stand the idea of meaningless physical relations again. When Luke had left, he had taken the photo album of their wedding, and she had been left with very few pictures of him and her together, and each day the memory of his looks, his voice, his spirit and personality, and his loving touch faded more and more from her life. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.